Hello, thank you for having me here. I wanted to first just thank my colleague, Elitzach Dembinski, who I think without his vision and determination and tremendous skills in coalition building, I'm not sure that we would be having this session. I know I wouldn't be standing here to be giving these few words. So thank you very much. Can I have the presentation? On the podium? Okay, thank you. So my job at ILO Highways is to look at multimodal systems and to plan how we integrate different modes in a complex, as was mentioned before in our last speaker, multimodal urban transport systems. And I really think that multimodal is a catchword, that it captures not only the diversity of the supply, but the diversity of the needs and the diversity of the objectives that we need to meet in terms of the various people that need to use our systems, different ages, different capabilities. And so when we look at transportation, I really think we need to look at it in the terms of choices that we offer people to meet the different needs. And therefore, my view is that transport, in effect, is a spatio-sociological issue that we need to address, or it has that context. And we need to look at the linkages between changes in transport technology, spatial form, and social structures. So I think that I'm going to, out of this slide, I think I'm going to emphasize the dramatic change that we did experience in meeting these emerging social needs actually in the 20th century in America. And if you look, you can see that we're talking about the age of the private car. And we look at this, if we look at post-World War II in America, there was a drive to provide increased housing. We had the baby boom, returning GIs from the war, very high demands on housing, and a different understanding of well-being and social structures. And along with that, there was the massive highway investment, so that brings the infrastructure into play. And it created a dramatic change in our social structures and the division between home and work. If I look at the 21st century and I look at the explosive linkage that we have now between transport and communications, which leads to a whole new context in which we need to address the needs of people economically, environmentally, and socially. And we look at multifocal cities and multifocal networks in mega cities. It's a globalization in networks of cities, of urban regions, and the multifocal aspect of the cities themselves in these urban regions. And it is this explosion of our use of communications that I think we have it here today, that COVID really emphasizes the fact that we use communications as an exchange for transport, as we will have guests who will speak from us from afar, but it doesn't completely exchange, because I think we're all really happy to see one another again. There's something about this coming together that really brings also not only exchange force, but an explosion in our need to communicate and to travel between different locations, both within our urban context and around the world. But even more than the social change, it has really changed how we deliver and manage and operate. So, how do I move this? Okay, so I really want to talk about the fact that we do use technology and communications to radically change the way we manage, operate, and deliver transport. And this brings us to a way we can look at these changes and how they might have impact on urban air mobility. And that is something called the Socio-Technological Perspective. And it's really about getting your ducks in a line in a way that creates a gestalt, a total system that's greater than its parts. So, if we go through this, well, I just turned it off, excuse me. If we go through this, I'm not very good at this, wrong way. Oh, this is it, okay. So obviously the technology, which I seem to have a hard time using here, it needs to be feasible, it needs to be affordable. We need to identify what are the market needs and the market segments that we'll be providing. But we also know that there's been a lot of discussion about regulation and governance, I think, in some of the sessions, and that need to enable technology, but I think it goes way beyond that. And we have to look at supporting industries that allow us to integrate and support these kinds of services. It needs management. It's not just about regulating, but it's about how we manage it, whether it's on the private side or the public side. And it has to be integrated. And as we can see, there's a push both for increased local transport, more walk, more cycle, as well as this innovative and exciting field of urban air mobility. But these things have to work together. It has to be integrated in a system of services. And then we look at the issue of infrastructure, which I think we're all very aware of the vertiports, but it brings very many new challenges for first and last mile issues, including third dimension and height, getting up, getting down. We have to look at networks of services and networks of urban air mobility locations and vertiports and infrastructures. But no less is the need to address for what purpose is it that we want to integrate urban mobility? What are the benefits that we want to gain from society? Obviously we want to look at economic growth, reducing costs to different movements that we need to accomplish, whether it be goods or people. But we also want to talk increasingly about sustainability, which we've all just been listening to the discussions about global warming. We're all aware also of the health impacts of air pollution. So how does this play in? And looking at it, as we would often say, from well to wheel, it's not just about the immediate impact, but we have to look at the total end-to-end picture. And the issues of equity and globalization. And I think that very often we get changes in technology bring about surprising results. So if we look at the telecommunications and low-cost airlines, we'll find that it didn't only benefit high-powered business travelers, it really benefited migration and immigrants in a way that's quite surprising and I think we didn't expect. So one of the things we know is that there are great movements of immigrants and refugees and choice immigrants as well, but the ability to stay in touch with their home communities really helps their integration into their new spaces. And so this is something that I don't think we expected, that the changes in communications technology and air travel could really be something that benefits and improves social equity and inclusion. So that's something that maybe we can also look at, and obviously making sure opportunities are available and access for everyone. And then we have many people are looking at issues of aging as we live longer. So we have people who have different mobility capabilities and different capacities to address different ways that we offer services. So this is also something, how well people have ability to use the technology, different preferences for how they address technology. We also know there's an issue of willingness. This is a big issue for urban air mobility. How willing will people be to get into a vehicle that goes up in the air with no pilot? And the issue of safety concerns. If we were talking about range anxiety in electric vehicles, we've got a whole big new anxiety to talk about here. And I think that's something that also is important to pay attention to. And of course, if we want to talk about quality of life impacts, we want to make sure that our technology improves our quality of life for all. And finally, there's that very strong impact on culture, which is exactly bringing us back to that 20th century impact of suburbs and vehicles and highways. And what is it that we're going to see in terms of behavior and urban form and the potential for globalization? Very often, green talk about the disadvantages of globalization, but I want to emphasize tremendous amount of benefits of globalization that we found when supply chains were interrupted now. So that's a very important perspective to take, as well as the changes that we will see in norms, spatial forms, activity patterns, the level of engagement and separation that we create between individuals. So there's the whole concept of traveling alone and together. So why we like trains, because we have this space for ourselves, but we're not entirely alone. And I think we can all, after COVID, appreciate sometimes the kind of experiences that we have just by engaging with people in a very kind of random way. And so I think those are some of the things we can look at. Anyway, I'd like to suggest that we are well primed here to engage with these discussions and with these new initiatives So obviously, we've had very successful experience now with experimenting and demonstrating the use of drones. I think there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn. And we've been able to create very quickly an ecosystem that supports drone activity on a commercial basis. And I think we're very proud of that. And I think that's something that we hope to extend further as we explore the further issues of urban air mobility. There's obviously, as this conference shows us, the supporting technologies, supporting industries, the relationship with the auto tech. We have diverse potential operating environments, a country that's small but very diverse in terms of urban settings, desert settings, low density urban, high density urban, and I think that gives us a lot of ways of looking at different environments that we can work in. We have Israel is 90% urbanized, even though I mentioned the diversity before in urban settings, but we are highly urbanized, high-tech savvy young population. We are culturally open to innovation and change. And one of the biggest kind of boon and bane issues is our urban transport systems are very underdeveloped. We suffer from extreme density on our highways, congestion, most days of the week, most hours of the day, and we have very few legacy systems. So the ability to adjust to new technologies and new infrastructures is actually quite high. And then, of course, we're a growing economy with growing demographics, so we're very dynamic in that sense. Cultural diversity, you might not think it, but anybody who's gone out for dinner can feel it in the cuisine, in the whole experience here. It's really a very diverse environment, and I hope you enjoy it while you are visiting, those of you from abroad. And of course, we're very globally integrated and focused on working with, cooperating around the world on technology. And I think that the guests and visitors that are coming from abroad and are joining us through Zoom are testimony to that as well. And why, just to bring together the work that we've done on drones and link it into this urban air mobility potential. So obviously, the zero emission, eco-friendly solution is critical to making this a success. The issue that I mentioned of the congested road system gives an economic boost and justification for accessing this third dimension. We generally have available airspace, although that's not exactly my expertise, but it seems that we have, from the cooperation we've been able to get through the Civil Air Authority and from the Air Force, it seems that there is willingness to access this airspace at the lower levels and in the urban context. We have technology ready for prime time. We're certainly driven by technology innovation and have what it takes to be able to put this in the air. Our regulators cooperate actively and promote this innovation, and the joint public and private type of enterprises is a very key element to what goes on here. And the leadership that we provide in robotics and airspace automation. And finally, what are our objectives as IALON Highways? We want to create an economically viable ecosystem that allows this technology to grow and develop and provide the services that it can offer in promoting well-being for our societies. We want to promote large-scale economic impact because that is the way to make things happen. And finally, our particular expertise is in creating the bridge between the industry and the regulatory frameworks. It's a place we feel comfortable being a government agency, but being also very attuned to private industry and our work in those in various areas of bringing these two worlds together. And finally, it's our pleasure and pride to be able to share this with the international community at large, to learn and to share of our experiences. And here are our partners from the drone demonstration projects, and I think it provides an excellent platform for moving forward into this new and exciting field. So with that, I will now introduce our next speaker, Dr. Vasilis Agurridas. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. With my last name, I shouldn't shouldn't talk. So he's an expert in bridging policy and industry. He leads the UIC2 program for Urban Air Mobility Initiative, part of the EU Smart Cities program, and serves as chairman of the UAM committee in the EU Autonomous Systems Development in Europe. He also serves as head of EU Public Co-Creation Ecosystem Outreach for Airbus. And I'd like to ask you one brief question. How do you see the shifts to micromobility in the spectrum of what's going on now in the urban context? And the push also for, on the one hand, micromobility and mass transit, and how does UAM kind of fit into the spectrum?
Thank you, Becky, for the question, and hello to everyone. I think the question has to be rather simple, because whether it is micromobility or any other mode of mobility, whether including air, this has to be as part of an integrated mobility system for a city or a region. So for me, this is the simple answer to your question.
Okay, and so I will leave you now, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a clarification, you mentioned about ASD. It is the Aerospace and Defense Industries Association of Europe. So I'm here today with my hat as the leader of the UAM Initiative Cities community. Please let me share my screen. And I hope you can see my slides now. So I'm working for Airbus, but I'm here not to talk to you about Airbus, but about the Urban Air Mobility Initiative Cities community. The mission, you will know a little bit more in the next few minutes. The mission of this initiative is to drive the sustainable and responsible transition of urban mobility to the third dimension, to the vertical dimension. So as already discussed by Becky, this is not just about aviation or technologies in aviation, it's about urban mobility. And we have a responsibility to drive this in a sustainable way. So this is a perspective that this initiative is taking on looking at urban air mobility, and this is how, this is the context of my presentation. Here you have an overview. It is a community of different cities that for years now, since 2017, when it was established within the EU Smart Cities Marketplace, where the cities have been exploring or trying to explore or even listen from other cities, how can we manage this emerging sector? So this initiative is about the voice of cities and regions. And here, just to clarify, because in different countries we use different terms. This could be metropolitan areas, it could be prefectures. So the cities and regions are just to indicate the local authorities, whatever the size could be. So what could be the role, in fact, of cities and regions in this emerging sector? The impact of this initiative, of this community, has been acknowledged also outside Europe. And we have partner cities and regions from US, for example, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and from Japan, the Prefecture of Mie. Everything started with the establishment of this initiative by thinking about mobility in cities. And already Becky outlined the importance of multimodality. And this is key for smart cities in the context of smart mobility. What we have been observing is that the third dimension has not been a part of it so far. And there are some good reasons from the technology perspective, because typical urban air mobility could have been manifested through helicopters, for example. For the different reasons, urban planners do not consider that, as perhaps we as a society we don't want to. So this is all changing now because we have a new breed of technologies that is coming from the electrification of mobility in general, that has passed also to aviation. So we can have zero emissions, at least at the point of consumption, as with cars, plus the fact that we can have reduced noise levels, plus the whole digitalization of mobility could enable a totally new business ecosystem. However, here, what we're talking about, and this is the motto of the initiative, it is not about the technologies. It's about smart mobility in smart cities. And the motto is walk, ride, drive, fly. The challenge here for the whole ecosystem, and specifically for cities and regions, is what is the purpose of this fly? For what are we going to use the third dimension, the vertical dimension? In any case, it has to be complementary to the existing systems. So when we're talking about this integrated sustainable urban mobility, one of the key concepts that discussed today, especially in the surface mobility area, is the mobility as a service. This is the integration of the different modes in order to move from a transportation-centric system to a more passenger-centric system. If we want to really reap the benefits from urban air mobility, this vertical dimension has to be an integrated part of it. However, it is not as easy as it may sound. Already there are very big challenges. If we take just the aviation sector, how do we integrate this new type of aircraft that fly at low level with the overall airspace? We have established operations around airports, for example. How can we do this in a safe manner? And this is one of the biggest challenges today with aviation players around the world. Significant work is happening there that is enabled by digitalization. However, even if we manage to integrate these vehicles in the airspace in a safe way, this is not enough. To reap the benefits, we need to integrate the information, the data between the air and the ground. And this is a real imperative for capitalizing and exploiting the opportunities that these technologies may bring. Talking about air traffic, this air traffic, as we outlined, is a little bit different. It's not the usual air traffic. It's about low-level altitude traffic that brings a lot of challenges, in fact, for cities, as many of these air vehicles, whether as smaller drones or bigger eVTOLs or taxis, can fly in many cases at lower altitudes than the tallest buildings. So this type of challenges have to be addressed by the same time by capitalizing on the innovation. One of the key aspects here, for example, is how the regulatory frameworks and governance frameworks could embrace these innovations. Overall, this urban air traffic sets new perspectives for industry, new economic spaces for cities, and new perspectives for mobility. In other words, it's about a totally new status quo for cities and regions. So yes, the urban air mobility brings opportunities and offers new opportunities for cities and regions to develop. But at the same time, it brings new tasks and responsibilities for them. We have to acknowledge that cities are the layer of governance which is closest to citizens. So from these perspectives, it is a legitimate claim from cities and regions that they should have an influential or deciding role in the governance of their space, or as we call in Europe, the use space. Just an example, if there are extremely noisy operations or accidents, the citizens will go to complain to a mayor. They will not go to complain to the Civil Aviation Authority. Having this in mind, the cities of the UIC2, they presented last year in December 2020 as part of the Amsterdam Drone Week, the UIC2 manifesto on the multi-level governance of the urban sky. These pledged at that time initially towards the European Commission and EASA to consider the local authorities as an important stakeholder within the governance of the use space and to be explicitly acknowledged. This has been signed by almost 30 cities up to date because this is changing, different cities and regions across Europe, and even have attracted the interest and support in terms of mindset by the cities outside Europe, like Mie Prefecture in Japan and the Massachusetts Commonwealth in US. One other organization, for example, among the others that have recently supported is the Italian Association of Municipality, ANSI, that you see here. So what has been the impact of this manifesto? In fact, the European Commission and EASA have responded to this type of request by the cities, and they have acknowledged as part of the approved use space implementation regulation in Article 18F that there is a need to establish a mechanism to coordinate not only with the aviation-related authorities, but with other authorities, entities, including at the local level. So you can see here already this, I would say, more sociological perspective that also Becky mentioned before about having non-aviation actors being actively involved and recognized in a more pure, I would say, aviation regulatory framework. And this is the impact of this manifesto. So just to brief a little bit about the activities of the initiative, it builds around the principles of how can we establish public and private support? How can we seek synergies between the ground and the air operations, as I tried to outline to you? And how do we meaningfully and purposefully co-create with citizens and the wider society? And all of this by having the cities and regions in the driving seat. This is how the UIC2 it is built. The map reaches only cities and regions, and there are task forces led by cities and regions that try to address this. On the blue, here, the blue box, you can see the prerequisites for any type of operations in an urban environment. So urban air mobility has to demonstrate and manifest these benefits. Otherwise, it cannot be considered as part of it. So UIC2, what is doing, in fact, is a city-centric platform to ensure a holistic approach to urban mobility, proactively engage with citizens, and co-create with public and private actors. So yes, as you have realized, it is about a business ecosystem, but it is more than that. And all of these activities and the social even aspects of urban air mobility and the task forces actually have raised an interest at a level beyond Europe. There is a need for a worldwide UN community of cities and regions. And this has been acknowledged by the World Economic Forum that is in preparation of launching such an initiative. It will be launched in January 22 as part of the Amsterdam Drone Week. And in fact, the aim of this coalition is to create a forum for extending already the work done in Europe through UIC2. And as with the UIC2, the goals will be to support the policymakers in responsibly integrating this emerging sector in the overall urban and regional networks. And of course, as with the UIC2, the agenda will be set and driven by cities and regions. So we are now in a moment where we're looking for cities and regions that want to take this commitment. And you can see the 3 bullet points there about the commitment we're looking for. So if any of the cities, if there are any cities here or regions that want to take this commitment and be part of this worldwide community, please feel free to contact me so we can arrange accordingly. The aim here is not to have technological demonstrations. The aim here is about demonstrations with the perspective of a service. So yes, it's about the business ecosystem, but most importantly, it's all about a social business ecosystem. It's not about what the technology can do, but what we want the technology to do for us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Vasilis. I think it was a very interesting presentation on the role of cities, and I think that's a particularly strong challenge for us, so thank you for your presentation. I'd like at this time to introduce Andreas Perotti, Chief Marketing Officer in Europe for Ehang, and he has over a decade in marketing, communications, corporate affairs, in aerospace and ICT. He is working often with the public sector and bridging policy and industry as well. And so, Andreas, can we make sure?
Hi, Becky. I can hear you perfectly, and great to be with you here today.
Oh, there you are. Okay, wonderful. So I just want to ask you a question. How do you see the market segment for UAM at this early stage in the development of it?
Well, the question is if we can already speak about a market or of a market as of today. You know, I always compare our industry when it comes to the level of maturity with the car and the automotive industry in the 1920s, with the big difference that technological adoption goes much faster today than 100 years ago. So we are in very early stage, but it's going to speed up very fast.
Thank you, and we look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Please allow me to share my screen and introduce you about what we're doing. Well, I'm honored to say that we're among the leading startup companies globally in the urban air mobility industry. We have been the first company worldwide which was presenting a fully autonomous and electrical passenger-grade drone in 2016 at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. We were the first company having an IPO on NASDAQ coming out of the urban air mobility spectrum, and we're the only company worldwide as of today which is already in operations. If you look at this big vision, this big dream of mankind of making it possible for everybody to fly, this is incorporated also in our name. We are coming from southeastern China, and our name Ehang is coming from the Mandarin words Yi and Hang, which means basically billions fly. So our vision is to bring billions of people up into the sky. And if you look at this slide and the two covers of this very popular engineering magazine, you can see that the dream of flying is something we are following since decades. And the truth is, what our industry is doing is not innovative, at least not innovative in a way how we transport people or also goods from A to B. We have it since decades, and it's called helicopter. The problem with helicopters is they're very cost intensive when it comes to CapEx, when it comes to OpEx, and also complicated in operations. So the innovation we are doing by using technology, making the functional principle of helicopters affordable for everybody. And why is that possible today? Since it wasn't possible in the last decades, because today we have the underlying fundamental technologies in e-mobility, in artificial intelligence and software, but also in lightweight manufacturing processes. I would like to speak a bit about our flagship model, which is this first serial model of a passenger drone worldwide, our model called Ehang 216. It's a fully electric passenger drone, so 100% sustainable, considering that the electricity has been produced sustainably. And it's a two-seater model, which can carry 2 passengers with a total payload of 230 kilograms in total. You also have a small trunk for some luggage in the back, and it carries people with 16 rotors. And all of these 16 rotors are connected with their own individual electrical engine, which is again connected with its own individual battery, meaning we have 16 isolated electrical cycles which don't interfere each other. So in case some cycle would stop working, and 4 of them can stop working in total, the vehicle still stays safely up in the air. We can fly a top speed of 130 kilometers per hour. And as of today, due to the battery technology, we can transport people for around 30 kilometers. And you know, the hardware is very sophisticated, but the real rocket science is in the back end. And we're originally coming from the software side. We're a software company which started in 2014 by developing a software ecosystem for autonomous flying. And this is what's powering this product, because you don't need a pilot, you don't need a pilot license. You have 2 passengers, you basically just sit inside, press a button on a map, and the system fully autonomously transports you from A to B. If that's in use, let's say in the near future, that's more a regulatory question than a technological one. And of course, we can adapt our system to the regulatory environment as well. And frankly speaking, in the beginning, we're not aiming for a consumer product, what is sold to the end consumer who puts it on his or her garage to freely fly around like everybody endeavors. That might be a nice imagination, but regulatory-wise, quite not in the near future. This is why we're aiming for operator-based models, meaning we are having partners from the airline industry, from transport companies, public transport companies, also municipalities. And together with these partners, we define in local areas, starting at landing points, and together with the aviation authority, predefine air routes. And the end consumer books a flight from A to B, like he orders a cab or a Uber today. So from the traffic perspective, it's a mix of a bus line with predefined stations, but also an individual character, because the consumer can decide from which station to which station she or he wants to go. If you look at this, you can see that it's far beyond R&D. It's far beyond a pure concept. We are in serial production, we are in serial operation, and here you can see around 100 routes we're already carrying or rolling out in the moment in our domestic market in China. And when you go there, you're most welcome to have a fly with us. This whole system, as mentioned, is detached from a human being, but not 100%. We operate for cost reasons, but also for safety reasons without a pilot. We think taking the pilot out and increasing the level of autonomy is not reducing safety and security, but it's increasing it. And at the end of the day, as mentioned, our competition is a flight from JFK Airport in the United States to the city center of Manhattan for $120 a flight. This is what we have to match and to be competitive with. And this is why the whole value chain has to be set up as lean as possible. But overall, to operate such a network of air taxis, as many people call them, of course, you need a command and control, like you need a tower at an airport monitoring the whole traffic system. And our ecosystems also operate with these command and control centers. And here you see a picture of one of our towers, if you want to call them like that, in Guangzhou in southeastern China. And there are sitting people inside. And these people are not necessary to have the whole system working, but they are monitoring it. And in case of being necessary, they can interfere, take direct contact with the passenger, and also bring the vehicle safely down to the ground. Here you can see a short overview on our portfolio. As mentioned, passenger transport is the one we're most well known for, but we're also in small cargo, in large scale cargo. We have many partners from DHL to Vodafone, the Red Cross, and many others. And we're also operating drone shows. This is basically demonstrating our technologies. We are holding several Guinness Book of World Records here, and it proves that we are able to operate thousands of small flying objects in a very small area without colliding with each other and being safe and secure and sustainable. We would be very delighted to also implement our technologies together with you in your fantastic country. I think Israel and innovation do not just share the first letter, but innovation is Israel and Israel is innovation. So it would be fantastic to find partners in your country to bring urban air mobility forward together and improve the daily lives of people. Thank you so much. Toda rabba.